thanks to President Trump picking up the phone and making some phone calls, and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, who talked about basically telling Ukraine, hey, folks, you're not joining NATO. We're stopping things right now. So I'm optimistic about this. How about you?
So am I. I mean, look, this is way past overdue. And when the American people hear something like this, I think the first reaction they're going to have is, how many hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian and Russian boys had to die for us to get to this end result? How many billions of dollars did the Europeans and the Americans have to fork up for a result that could have happened 2 years ago? I mean, this could have happened 2 years ago, and this can go on for another 4 years, and the result is going to be the same. Ukraine is never going to defeat Russia. They never were. They're now fighting over probably inches of territory. And the reality is, in the end, Ukraine was never going to be allowed to join NATO. And realistically, they were going to have to give up some territory to the Russians. That doesn't mean we want them to. I mean, you're going to see a reaction here in the media in the next couple of days that Trump is caving to Putin and he's giving in to Putin's demands. And the response to that is, well, what else are you going to do with a nuclear super? You have a country with over 3,000 nuclear weapons, and they are on Europe's border. And so, yes, there has to be some sort of negotiation here to see an end to this war. I think President Trump understands that. And part of that, I'm sorry, for the Ukrainians does include that they will never be in NATO. And this is a stark contrast from what we saw under Joe Biden and the delusional neocons in his administration, who honestly wanted the end goal of deposing Vladimir Putin. They wanted regime change in Russia, and they were guided by these false idealistic beliefs that they were going to be able to keep Ukraine's territory intact and that they were somehow going to defeat Vladimir Putin. It was a lie then. It was a lie 3 years ago, and it's a lie now. And thankfully, President Trump sees that and is going to put a quick end to this.
Yeah, and, you know, I hope he does this. I don't know what's holding him back now, especially since President Trump is in office. But Naftali Bennett, who was the prime minister of Israel very briefly when this conflict started, had a peace deal all hammered out. And frankly, the Biden team nixed it. He hemmed and hawed when he was asked about it a second and a third time, because you know why. He didn't want to anger Joe Biden, who was then in the White House. But maybe we'll get the full story now, because to me, that is the biggest scandal. There was actually a deal on the table years ago, and how many lives could have been saved? Just an atrocity, really. All right, Eduardo, let's now play a fun game. I like to call it Clueless Mainstream Media. And here's our edition of the game today. Look at this headline from USA Today. This makes me laugh. 5 ways Elon Musk is working to dismantle the federal government. Now, I promise you the headline writer at USA Today doesn't get the fact that more than half of the readers actually look at that headline as a positive. They wrote that headline, Eduardo, thinking this would be a scare tactic, make the people angry. So, Eduardo, you know, I'm sorry, but that's exactly the way I think most Americans are looking at this. It's a thumbs up. Someone needs to knock on the clueless heads of the USA Today.
Well, I love this. Okay, so the U.S. government last year spent nearly $8 trillion. 5 years before that, before COVID, it was around $3 trillion. So according to USA Today, all of these Democrats, everybody in the media, if we don't spend more than $8 trillion, anything less than that, I mean, if we just say, hey, can we go back to spending 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, you're destroying democracy, you're dismantling the United States Constitution and everything about our government. I mean, it's completely absurd. The American people see this. That's why they elected Donald Trump. And for all these claims about nobody elected Elon Musk, actually, a lot of us Trump voters did. You know, Trump was very transparent about bringing Elon Musk with him on the campaign trail, saying very clearly, if I'm elected, I'm going to appoint Elon to take a look at some of the waste and abuse in our government. And that is exactly what he's doing. I also find that line of commentary funny, because this is the same party, the Democrats, who are defending these nameless, faceless bureaucrats who have been in Washington for decades, who do these things that many of us aren't even aware of. They give out these contracts. They do these rule changes in the department. They really act unilaterally separate of the executive and the legislative branch. So who elected those people? I mean, the whole thing is absurd. Also, when you consider the fact that Joe Biden was not even running this country, that he had a cabal of people like Jake Sullivan and Antony Blinken running things. I mean, did anybody elect those two? So this whole thing here is a reaction over the fact that Elon Musk is gutting the Democrat slush fund. What do I mean by that? Most federal spending that is to some of these silly programs overseas or even domestically, I mean, in other words, take aside Social Security, Medicare, and defense spending, most other spending is really to Democrat causes. If millions and millions and billions of dollars of U.S. taxpayer money was going to conservative causes overseas, or was going to conservative domestic causes in different states. You can be assured that the Democrats would have tried to put a stop to this years ago. The reason why they are getting so bent out of shape about it is because their donors, their friends, in some cases their spouses in Washington, some of these members of Congress, benefit from these so-called nonprofits, these fake charities that get millions and millions of dollars from the government. They pay their board members upwards of $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 a year. I'm not making this up. You can look this up. And there's an entire employment group in Washington that is based on these fake 501c3 charities, these nonprofits that keep all of these people employed. And finally, after 30 years, someone is coming to town and saying, the gravy train is over. You're not going to live these luxury lives off the American taxpayer. We're putting a stop to it. And honestly, it's amazing to see, and what I hope to see. So you're going to be distracted out there in the media by these small line item things. I think it's great that Elon is pointing it out. But the real fraud to me could be in Medicare and Social Security. And I'm not talking about Americans getting their paychecks, but what Elon is saying here, and what I know to be true, at least from my experience here in South Florida, where I like to say we're the fraud capital of America in many ways. There's a lot of healthcare fraud down here. If he's able to find in Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, these benefit programs, fraudulent people using dead Americans to claim these benefits, some of these benefits going overseas, which he has said, he says he thinks there's upwards of hundreds of billions of dollars a year in these programs being defrauded. And it makes sense to me. I mean, again, as I said at the top, I don't know how you go from spending $3 to $4 trillion a year 5 years ago to now more than double that. And the fact that we can't say anything about that without being accused of dismantling democracy, it is laughable, and it shows you that there really is no organized resistance to this. The Democrats can hoo and haw outside of these agencies all they want, but they're losing and they know it. Yeah,
I've always felt like Medicare and Medicaid can make a bumper sticker that says "Dead Americans." They're not just for Election Day anymore. All right, Eduardo, we got some more bad news about inflation yesterday. The last month of the Biden presidency saw inflation spike quite a bit more than expected. But, DOGE can help turn this around because government spending is the key driver. Some people say it's the only driver, but everyone agrees it's the key driver of inflation. So if DOGE is able to do even a little bit of what you talked about, that could be something that turns inflation around very quickly. I wonder if the American people understand that. Are we doing a good enough job of explaining that?
I think Elon and President Trump have done a good job of explaining that, and they should continue to push that. They should continue to attack anyone resisting this movement as someone who wants to keep prices high. And they should say very plainly, because as you said, this is exactly the reason why we have the inflation and why we had the very high 8-9% inflation that we did under Biden. It's because the U.S. government printed trillions and trillions of dollars in money in a very short year span. The M2 money supply, which is a measure of cash and certain U.S. dollars in circulation, at one point in the Biden presidency increased by 40%. So the amount of dollars in circulation right now, thanks to his presidency, is far greater than it was before. And that's from, again, these government programs that we're told are necessary. We're told they need to keep our economy afloat. So if they are able to cut that, that will be one area of the inflation. And I think the other thing we're seeing President Trump do is with regards to oil. He's trying to get the Saudis and our domestic suppliers to pump more, TBD on whether they will actually do that. But I think one thing we're seeing, at least internationally, with his negotiations with Venezuela, which is now accepting these migrant flights back to their country, which is sort of a surprise to the rest of it. I mean, most people did not think Venezuela was going to accept these migrants. And I think part of the negotiating ploy there from Trump could be, listen, you accept these migrants, we'll loosen some of the sanctions, you get pumping on oil, it'll help your economy, and it'll help us in terms of lowering the cost of fuel, which if that comes down, then basically every single good on the market, which is transported from oil, will also come down as well. So I think that's part of the plan here. It'll take a little while to happen. And frankly, anyone criticizing Trump for saying, oh, you were elected to bring prices down, and here it's 6 weeks into your administration, you haven't done that. I mean, that's ridiculous. Even the most diehard Trump supporters know that it's going to take a while to really see the effects of turning the economy around. It could take a year. And so I think President Trump is on the right track, and we'll just have to see how things continue to play out.
Well, we got a win yesterday because the peace talks discussion between Russia and Ukraine drove oil prices down overnight and this morning. We're back down to the $70 a barrel level. So there's that. Hey, I only have about a minute left, but can you tell me, I know that you're a big supporter of Tulsi Gabbard, and she was confirmed as DNI. Can you talk about a little bit of some of the objections that patriots, I'm not talking about the haters, address? I mean, again, I know you only have a minute, but some of the objections that some patriots might have about her, and address those.
Tulsi, as everybody knows, used to be a Democrat. And so she's got some views on domestic issues and on the world, on foreign policy that differ from the traditional Republican way of thinking. And so I understand that if there's a policy objection, they disagree with her. What I object to, and like you said, it's the haters, is they use those policy disagreements to attack her character. And I'm glad that those efforts failed. I know Tulsi well. She is an honest broker. She's one of the kindest and most honest people I worked with. She always cared about finding the truth and getting to the truth. And I think that will be pivotal in her role as Director of National Intelligence. And for people who are a little concerned, who say, well, I don't like her view on this issue or this issue, she's not in a policy-making role. Her job, and I've seen this firsthand, she's capable of doing, is to provide the president with accurate intelligence and an assessment of the intelligence community. I believe she will do that. I believe, most importantly, she will help restore faith in the intelligence community, which has been destroyed. They have destroyed their own credibility over the last few years. And I think someone like her, who is supported by both parties, who is supported by a middle crowd of Americans, will be able to do that in a nonpartisan way.
Well, the best way to reform the intelligence community may be just to get rid of the community part of it, the lifelong members of an intelligence community. That's probably,
right.
I've got no problem with spies, and I know it's necessary, but to be a lifelong spy in a place like the CIA is just a recipe for disaster. Eduardo Naret, he has the Naret Files on Substack. Check that out. Check him out on X. He's great. Thank you so much for joining us.
Jake, thanks so much.